What's the reaction been to Conor Benn's move to Zuffa in the Matchroom stable? We heard Barry Hearn earlier on talking about the lack of loyalty. He was very upset on breakfast this morning. Has it been keenly felt throughout the organisation?
Yeah, look, we're all different. We've been through a lot with Connor over the years. We've stood by him in tough times. My mindset is very much it is what it is, and we have to move on. We have a huge business. We deliver 40 events a year around the world. We've got a sold out show this weekend in Phoenix, and if you spend too much time, focusing on that, you're not going to focus on the positive. It's a shame, but we are where we are.
Barry Hearn quite upset on the breakfast show. Eddie Hearn talked about it as well, saying that maybe they made a mistake with Conor. They thought that they had, that they had a relationship with him. They've been with him for a long time. They'd earned a little bit of loyalty from him. Barry did say, if you want loyalty, buy a dog at the same time. But the situation is that Conor Benn, who they stuck with during a very difficult period, has gone on and signed with Dana White. What's your reaction to it?
I think Frank's reaction is probably the most mature reaction I've heard. The reasons why they stuck with Conor Benn, insofar as they did, was because there was a huge commercial opportunity via Conor Benn. It wasn't out the goodness of their hearts. It wasn't a case of a charity case. Eddie might, at the time, I remember talking to Eddie, didn't lend him any money. No, I didn't lend him any money. Now we find out he did lend him some money. At the time, he didn't have a contract with Conor Benn, told me he didn't need to have a contract with Conor Benn. The fact is that things changed. I'm sure there were plenty of fighters at Matchroom that were very unhappy when Matchroom decided to pick up and leave Sky and move over to DAZN and do precisely what was best for Matchroom. Conor Benn has made some comments in the past where he gets hoisted by his own petard here because he suggests that he has an undying loyalty to Matchroom and he respects the commitment they put in behind him and never wants to leave them. So he makes himself look slightly ridiculous there. But watching it, people will think it's formulaic for me to have a go at Eddie Hearn. I'm not having a go at Eddie Hearn. I'm compartmentalising this into language that isn't emotive. There is no obligation upon Conor Benn to stay with Matchroom in perpetuity. One of the things I made a point with Eddie when we had that argument 2 or 3 years ago, of which 90% of what I said was right, and Eddie was just trying to confuse it around the fact that I don't know as much about boxing as he does, that contracts need to be done in a blue chip way. If you're a blue chip promoter, you should have a blue chip contract. And at the time, it was an argument about promoting, i.e. he would still have to promote Conor Benn if Conor Benn did something horrendous, which at the time was fail a drugs test, and he still had an obligation to promote him. I would suggest one of the main component parts of being a blue chip promoter is to secure your talent. If you haven't secured your talent, then you're going to have nothing to promote. So if you want to start pointing your finger at whether Conor Benn shows loyalty or not, then look back at yourself at your own contractual situation because you left your backside hanging out in the wind. So I'm surprised that everyone's crying about it. Conor Benn has made Matchroom a lot of money out of these 2 fights. And Conor Benn, as a result of Matchroom guiding him and ensuring that the opportunity was maximised, has made a lot of money himself. Should he respect that? Should he stay with some of the words that he said? Well, that's for him to decide. But the idea, I'm sure that Ben Shalom's sitting there going, well, I don't like Matchroom pinching Ben Whittaker. But he had to get on with it. And I'm sure that Matchroom will get on with it in the same way that Frank has just alluded to, surrounding the fact that Conor Benn's gone and fight for Zuffa. What it makes Conor Benn look like? He wanted to fight for the WBC belt, didn't he? It was a big thing, a big legacy thing that his father had won. All a load of old nonsense. It's about money. And this discussion is about money.
He's been offered a lot to go.
Well, yeah, I'm sure he has. And his job is to maximise his opportunity, whether he owed Eddie Hearn courtesy, whether there should have been a way of operating, who knows? But what I can say is this confected outrage, when I see people like Carl Frampton and people jumping up and down and throwing their 2 penny in, the reasons why, and Frank will probably disagree, the reasons why Conor Benn was supported in whatever travails he had, and some of that advice was really poor advice, and he wasn't supported that much because he wasn't stopped about going on Piers Morgan shows and things like that to damage his reputation, was because at the end of that particular rainbow wasn't a leprechaun, was a huge bag of money that was always in the offing if they could leverage the legacy fight between Eubank and Benn, and that is why Matchroom stayed supporting Conor Benn. That's why Eddie Hearn lent him some money because he wanted it back as well. So let's get things into context before we all start jumping up and down and using emotive language.
Frank?
Look, I think, when you look at the situation, none of us are ever trying to stop a fighter from making money. Boxing's a tough sport. It's a short career and you have to maximise your income. I think there's a way to go about things. And I think with what we dealt with Conor and went through, there was a way he should have dealt with it in terms of making a phone call. I agree with certain points Simon made there, but there's a way to go about things. And I think that's just basic morals, take out busy, you know, to
Do you
ring
take any
and
responsibility for not securing the talent, though?
yeah, obviously. I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, we didn't have him signed. But we felt that the relationship was bigger than a signed contract, as we've had with
Frank,
other fighters in the past.
just out of curiosity, what is it you think you went through? The reasons why you got caught in the crosshairs at Matchroom is because Eddie tried to keep this fight on when his fighter had failed drugs test, and any shrapnel that you guys caught was as a result of that, and not really. And you didn't spend that much time defending Conor Benn. You sat there waiting for the opportunity to manifest itself that he cleared his own name, and then take the benefits of the opportunity that was waiting in the wings, which was Eubank Ben.
Yeah, look, we can agree to disagree, as we, you know, Simon. I feel Conor wouldn't have been in the position he's in without Matchroom investing the time, money, effort into him. Even take away the situation of 2 years ago with the doping piece, we invested heavily into him. We carried on backing him, building him into what he is today. He had to go in there and deliver in the fights, of course, but without us doing that, he wouldn't have been in the position he was in. That's my opinion.
And Frank,
right?
Frank, just to ask the question, would you take Conor Benn back again if he suddenly became available after this one match, this one fight that he has?
I think, I'd hope you can tell from, so I'm quite emotionless when it comes to this. People come and go, you know, and it is business at the end of the day. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to welcome him with open arms. It would be a different relationship. It would be less personal. It would just be business. Then it would be what makes sense for us as a company. And that changes the relationship completely.
Isn't that all he's guilty of? It just being business, in him going off somewhere else?
Not really. I mean, there is that in essence, but I think it also comes down to the way you handle it. After 10 years of a relationship we've had with him, like I've been on holiday with Conor Benn. I've spent time around him personally, away from just boxing. He hasn't messaged me. He hasn't phoned me to say thanks for everything. You know, it's two separate things.
Can you venture an opinion as to the reason why Conor has behaved this way? If you guys know him as well as you do and have been on holiday with him, what do you think the driving force is behind A, departing from you guys, and B, not having the courtesy to do it in a way that you'd still be unhappy, there'd still be recriminations, but you'd probably have less of an argument about the manner in which it was done? What do you think's behind all that, Frank?
Obviously money being a key factor, which I understand. And then I think the people around him, there's new people around him. There's a new manager behind him who, you know, looks at it in a different way. You know, and I think that changes the relationship. The manager has come in 18 months ago, hasn't been through what we've all been through together, the tough times when we've had Conor Benn sitting in our office crying his eyes out because of the situation, when we've sat with him, you know, from years of tough periods, and a new manager's come in and he doesn't look at the relationship. He doesn't look at the work that's gone in, you know, the time that's been spent with him. But again, everyone's got their own driving force, and it's what it is. Like I say, I'm quite, we have to move forward. We have to move on. If we spend too much time in negative energy, you know, we're not going to carry on doing what makes our business what it is.
That's very well said, Frank.
And in which case, you do have to move on. You do have to think about what's next. How much of a threat is Zuffa to your stable of boxers? And are you busy now making sure that you have secured your talent for the future? Or are there some that still might get poached or tapped up?
Of course, Zuffa are a huge threat. I've always said it. They're an amazing business. You know, as a group, they're, you know, market cap of 41 billion across a whole host of different properties. Very intelligent people. You know, but I think you can come in and splash a lot of cash about. But at the end of the day, Dana White said it himself. Boxers are overpaid. That's what Dana White said himself. And he wants to create a sustainable business. So he's going to come in and they're going to make this splash with a certain group of people. Of course they are. But ultimately, they have to reset the market if they want to create a business that is sustainable with long-term value. You know, of course they're going to go for other fighters, just like we've signed other fighters. You know, I've seen people say about when we signed Ben Whittaker. You know, it happens. Fighters are going to come and go from different promoters. It's just sometimes there's a deeper relationship and a deeper bond, or you think there is, than just the sport. So, yeah, we're working through and we'll continue.
Frank, does this steer into the narrative that at the time made Eddie bristle about my observations about, because obviously alongside Dana is Turki Al-Sheikh, and the observations I made about the challenges that you guys, you know, you were dancing with the devil. Not just you, Frank as well, Frank Warren as well, about the ultimate motivations of the Turki Al-Sheikhs of the world that are going to come in, eyeball your space, and take it from underneath you. and turn you into glorified agents. And Eddie said to me, well, we've got 20 years, or we've got massive experience in event creation and event management. And I said, well, these guys can acquire those skills. These guys can acquire that opportunity because they've got the cash and the wherewithal to turn out everybody's lights. Does it steer into that sort of narrative that underpins that sort of observation that they can take whatever they want, whenever they want, and that their ultimate game is to not have you in their space, to not have Frank Warren in their space, is to own that space?
I think Turki Al-Sheikh, he continues to do, his ring events with us as well, so that continues to happen. Obviously, Zuffa is majority owned by Seller. I believe they own 60% of Zuffa Group, so they are going to continue to invest, of course. But look, we've seen so many people come in over the years. Whether it was PBC with 600 million of Waddell and Reed's money.
Oh, this is proper dough, Frank. This is different level dough.
I know it's huge, but it's not just huge dough. These are also, I accept, very serious people that operate at the highest level
with different
of business.
agendas about commercialising their own country.
But I also think the Zuffa business is management led by Nick Khan, Ari Emanuel, Mark Shapiro. Dana White, of course, is the face of the business as well. So they are higher level operators than have come in previously. But I think you're only as good as well. Broadcast deal is very important. We've just signed a new 5-year exclusive agreement with DAZN, and that's a big piece for us. I don't believe, and maybe I'll be proven wrong one day, but I don't believe anyone's ever going to come into boxing and take over boxing like they've done in the UFC, for example.
Yeah,
I just can't see it personally. And again, maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I believe we will always be there. And it's a great fight to have. It's great competition to have, to be competing against those kind of people. For Dana White to be choosing Eddie as the person to go up against, it's going to be great fun. And that competition will only drive us forward.
Benny's out of order, says one texter, to not even give the dignity of a phone call with Eddie and put his reputation, when Eddie put his reputation on the line and lent him money in big capital letters. Unreal treachery. Let's talk a bit about Zuffa. It is a company that is owned by Dana White
and Seller,
which is owned by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. And Turki Al-Sheikh is massively behind this, isn't he? So just explain to us what you expect to see from it over the course of the next few months, because the idea is that they end up putting on some big fights in 2026, 12, I think.
I mean, ultimately, they've signed Jai Pattaya, and who we're going to see these fighters fight. I mean, I was of the impression, and I'm happy to be corrected, that when you signed to fight for Zuffa, you fought in the wrapper that they had. And their big thing was that they didn't like the amount of belts are out there. They're going to deconstruct a lot of it and make people fight for one particular belt, Ring Magazine Zuffa belt. So how's Conor Benn shouting about fighting the winner of Garcia versus Mario Barris for the WBC strap? Because I would assume that flies in the face of the mission statement of what Zuffa was there for. So I thought, by the way, I thought Frank Swift handled that conversation very well, because he just neutralised it to some extent, didn't he? I mean, ultimately, there's no motivity, because there's lots there. Eddie Hearn sits there talking about blue chip contracts and doesn't sign his guy to one. If you're a blue chip promoter, if you're the best in the world, the one thing you've got to do is sign your talent to contracts. And if you haven't, then you've got nothing to promote. So get your house in order. And the crying about how much money he may or may not have lost, because we're talking about someone losing money. Conor Benn's entitled to go and sign for someone else if he wants to. Whether that's right or wrong, he is entitled to, in the same way that Eddie Hearn was entitled to move Matchroom from Sky, irrespective of what his fighters want, drop them on DAZN, and then when his fighters didn't like it, they had to get on with it. So it's how the world works. And all this confected outrage about disloyalty and so on and so forth, I find it perplexing. And I thought Frank was very calm and lucid in his thinking. And by the way, Matchroom are far bigger than Conor Benn. They've had a nice little divvy. They've made a nice little bit of money out of Conor Benn. They only lent him money because they wanted him to get back on his feet so they can get him in the ring against Eubank. They were prepared to do everything they possibly could, irrespective of failed drugs tests. So there's a lot about that you could really unpack and go,
but doesn't that just sort of show how valuable he was to
financially? Then why didn't you sign him to a proper contract then?
And what is left for them? Who is the golden child now at Matchroom?
Well, I mean, Matchroom is a multifaceted business. I mean, they've got
the boxing department. Let's talk about.
Yeah, I mean, they've got but they've got Anthony Joshua on a lifetime deal, haven't they? They've got a variety of different talent out there. They've got relationships with Boots Ennis. They've got Josh Kelly, who's a new world champion, that they should be promoting and making sure that Josh Kelly gets his dues and fights in a unification fight in the summer. They've got plenty. Don't underestimate. I mean, Matchroom is a valuable business. And what you saw there, and myself and Frank have had our ups and downs over the years, what you saw there was a very calm and lucid approach to it. And what you saw earlier on from Barry and from Eddie was an emotional conversation. And people could say, well, of course they're emotionally invested. But they didn't do it out of the goodness of their hearts. They didn't do it because they love Conor Benn. They didn't do it because Conor Benn was their surrogate son. There was a commercial plan for Conor Benn, and the Conor Benn name and the Benn name carried it forward. And the monetization of him was landed in the Eubank fight, a fight that potentially should never have happened for lots of different reasons, and a sport that was brought into disrepute by the conduct of promoters and fighters prior to that, when all the drug ban came into play and Eddie and Callie were trying to get the fight on and calling the British Boxing Board of Control liars and God knows whatever else they were doing at the time. But I think, personally, that Conor Benn would be better off with Eddie Hearn, better off with Matchroom. They were a world-class promotional operation. And Zuffa, and like Frank says, Zuffa are trying to regulate the flow, because the one thing that's happened with UFC is they're getting sued left, right and centre.
Martin, do you want to come in?
Well, I just wonder whether that's Matchroom just got a little bit complacent in the end and just lent too much on that moral side of, oh, we've looked after him, so they didn't really offer him enough money.
Quite possibly. Crimea River Matchroom, says one texter, I know and they know that fighters will always go where the money is. They're called prize fighters for a reason. I don't understand why the Hearns tried this tugging on the emotions when clearly they weren't offering as much money. If they dropped Ben, they would use the same reasoning. It's just business.